will depart into the wing and let you take it from here.
Well, hello everybody. I am so excited to be here. We have a lot to discuss, so let me go ahead and share my screen. We did a tech check, so I know how to do it, I think. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can see. I think. Just
Looks good.
Oh, yay, nice. Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome to my talk. This is about AMPScript optimization tactics for enterprise level email. So this one is for all my lovely Salesforce Marketing Cloud friends. I hope you find this useful. So I would like to just start by introducing myself. I have followed a lot of you for quite a long time. I'm very excited and honoured to be speaking alongside you guys. So I know who you are, but I wondered if you might like to know who I am. So hello, I'm Jen. I love being an email geek, like I hope all of you guys do. And I've actually worked with email for over 10 years now, which is a little bit scary. I'm not quite sure where all the time has gone. Now, I'm a very lucky girl because I work for probably one of the best enterprise level organizations out there. I'm currently working as a senior Salesforce Marketing Cloud engineer for the Lego Group, which is just the best company ever. And this is my little Lego minifigure alter ego. So I hope we have some Lego fans in the chat. Hopefully we do. And probably most excitingly, I hope some of you might have even seen this, but I've recently started my very own YouTube channel, which is all about email. It's called The Email Code, and this is a picture of me in my flat having converted my living room to a YouTube studio. So we have a lot of fun there, especially when some engineer or handyman comes round to fix my tap and sees a whole YouTube studio with all my emails set up. I will be linking to that at the end of the talk, so please stay tuned because I would love for you guys to come and see it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to hit you guys with a sales pitch now to try and convince you why this topic matters and why is AMPScript optimization so important for your email campaigns. So AMPScript is an amazing tool in Salesforce Marketing Cloud for personalizing your emails. But when you're working at enterprise level, you're likely going to be dealing with a lot of data. And we're talking like millions and millions of records. So that's not a mean feat. So it's really, really important to streamline and optimize your AMPScript to prevent slow processing, particularly if you're intending to perform some very complex personalization functions. And usually in a big enterprise level organization, it does call for that kind of level of complexity. So streamlining your AMPScript can also help you to reduce the risk of errors, help you to maintain your campaigns effectively, and help you to scale and future-proof your emails. So hopefully that has convinced you why it's important and to stick with me here. So I know everybody right now is probably sat on the edge of their seats, like waiting to see some AMPScript code, but I'm actually going to start with a secret ingredient. Can you guess what it is? So the secret ingredient here is preparing your data. So data is the foundation upon which AMPScript sits. So if you get this right, you can really supercharge how you streamline your AMPScript. And I've just got a few top tips for how you can actually do this. So my first one is to index your data extensions with a primary key field. As you can see here, the key has a little happy face because this is a good thing to do. So indexing is a way to improve performance of processes within Salesforce Marketing Cloud, such as things like data retrieval and manipulation, which is quite important when you've got a lot of data. Now, an index isn't something that can be applied manually, but it's worth noting that Salesforce Marketing Cloud will automatically index any primary key field. So if you can include a primary key field in your data extensions, you should notice your input performance has improved. And I've seen this quite a lot where I've tried to do something on a data extension that doesn't have a primary key. We add a primary key, it works a lot faster because Marketing Cloud will automatically index it. So just a reminder, a primary key is a field or a set of fields in a data extension that ensures that each record within that data extension is unique. Now, one caveat that I just have to mention here is that you need to be strategic when designating a field as your primary key. So having too many primary key fields can defeat the purpose of a unique identifier, and it can actually decrease performance and work backwards. So we don't want to do that. So just try and stick to having 1 or 2 fields as a primary key if you can, if possible. My next tip is to pre-process some data transformation with SQL. So as you can see here, we've got 2 methods, and AMPScript always executes at the point of send. So this is quite a critical time, particularly if you need to get your email out in a timely manner. For example, like if it's some kind of like a product launch email and you've got to get it out in a timely manner before it starts going all over social media and all your audience has a buzz about it. You want to be the first to tell them. So although AMPScript does have a lot of clever data transformation functions that you can use to format your data, you can actually do much of the same data transformation functions with SQL before you execute the send. And this can take some of the heavy lifting away from AMPScript at that critical time when you're executing your send. So if you have a look at this top method here, if we were to do this in SQL, if we wanted to format a date like this, and we were to do it in SQL first, that would negate the need for us to do it this third line of code in the AMPScript block here. So it just takes a bit of the lifting away if you can do it. So if possible, try and do as much data transformation as you can with SQL to speed up processing at the point of send. I know sometimes it's not always possible if you're doing like a real-time trigger and the data's coming in real time. You might not be able to have the chance to do any pre-processing with SQL, which is fine. But if you do, it's a good tip. And finally, set retention policies on your data extensions. So data retention policies allow data to be automatically deleted from your data extensions after a specified time period. And this is a great way to remove redundant data without manual intervention or cleanup. So you can just put your feet up and kick back, and Marketing Cloud will sort it all out for you and clear records after a specified time period, which I guess depends on the project, what time period you specify. But the key thing to remember here, and the key thing why I want you guys to try and do this, is it ultimately results in a smaller data set. And this can really help you to streamline your AMPScript, particularly if you need to perform data lookups, because if you're removing redundant data out of your data set, it means there's a lot less data that SFMC then has to process and evaluate. So those are just some of my top tips for how you can prep your data. But now for what you all came for, let's have a look at some AMPScript and have a look at how you can streamline your AMPScript. So scenario 1 is lookups. So this is a common thing that you will do in AMPScript. And let's just say you want to output the customer's first name, last name, and date of birth into your emails. And let's say this data extension sits in a separate data extension. And when I say data extension, just for those of you who aren't familiar with Marketing Cloud, a data extension is basically just a table of data, right? It's just Marketing Cloud's term for it. So this data is in a separate data extension, and that data extension is called customers. Now, how you will do this is with a lookup, right? And there's two methods, both would achieve this, okay? So lookup functions allow you to retrieve data that sits in other data extensions. So if it's not the data that sits in the data extension of the subscriber list that you're sending to, it will be in a separate data extension. So you want to use a lookup to retrieve data from that. Now, method one looks more simple, doesn't it? Like, you've only got 3 lines of code here. You don't have to do any conditional statements or any complex loops. But don't be deceived, because what you're actually doing with just a simple lookup function, that just retrieves a column rather than a whole row. So what you're actually doing is you're making poor Salesforce Marketing Cloud look for the same information 3 times. Think of it as like a detective, and you're sending it out to go and find your data. But by doing it like this, it has to go and find the data 3 separate times. It's going to get a bit exhausted and it's going to fall over. So what's better to do if you have to retrieve more than one field? If it's just one field, use a lookup. I have no issues. If you want to retrieve more than one field, you're actually better using method 2 and doing something like lookup ordered rows or lookup rows, because what that does is it returns the whole entire row, and then from the row you can pull the information that you need and set it into a variable. And Marketing Cloud only has to look for the data once, and then it can chill out and relax. So it's just, I wanted to just flag this because I see it quite often. I think it can be quite deceptive, just because it just looks so much simpler, doesn't it? And it's a lot easier to write one simple function than write a whole loop and conditional statement. But really, when you're dealing with a lot of data, you really have to prioritize the processing on the system. So that's my advice on lookups. Now I'm going to move on to loops, my favorite. So we've got another scenario that's going to involve some loops here. So let's say you want to output images of up to 3 products that a customer's recently ordered into your email. And in order to do this, you're going to need to retrieve the product number from each record in the orders data extension, and then use that product number to retrieve the product image URL from the products data extension. So what you're going to do is something like this. So this is a pretty complex loop. So this is one way that you could do it. And I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of this, because if you have a look at, let's have a look at what this code is doing here. So we're starting with one loop here where we're looking up in the orders data extension. And we're looping through the orders data extension. We're capturing all the information that we need about the order. Then we're finding the product number. Then we're doing another lookup to the products data extension. We're doing another loop inside that. We're outputting the HTML as well. That's quite a lot of stuff happening all at once for the system. So I'd say this is probably a bit of an overly complex nested loop. And I'm going to try and convince you why you should avoid doing this. So complex nested loops can significantly impact performance, especially when you're dealing with large data sets. So remember, each iteration of the inner loop multiplies the processing time, and this is going to potentially lead to slower script execution. The more complex nested loops you have, the more challenging your code becomes to understand, debug, and maintain. And it can lead to errors that are harder to identify and fix. And I swear I have spent many, many hours crying, pulling my hair out, trying to get to the bottom of errors because they're stuck in these big, complex nested loops. So try and keep it as simple as you can. And as your data grows, complex nested loops might actually become less scalable, and it can be very inflexible in terms of where you can place that code in your email. So if you've started to have a few different modules that you want to use, if you've got a complex nested loop like that, you have to wrap all of that around one module and have it in a specific place. So I'm going to show you my favorite alternative to this of how you can simplify it with my favorite function, which is called build row set from string. So let's have a look at what we're doing here instead and how this is different. So inside your loop, inside your first loop, you can actually use the concat function to build a comma delimited string, which can be stored in a variable. So what you're actually doing here at this point in the code is building a string that looks like this: 1, 2, 3, comma 4, 5, 6, and with all different commas, with all different products IDs. And then once the loop is finished, we're actually using a substring function to remove that final comma on the string. So then we've got a proper comma delimited string. And then what we're doing is we're using the build row set from string function. And what this does is it builds a single column table containing all of our product ID values as per the order of the initial orders loop. So you've just got a very simple one column table. So in the first row, you'd have 1, 2, 3. In the second row, you'd have 4, 5, 6. In the third row, you'd have 7, 8, 9. And what that does is it actually gives us the flexibility to loop through product rows completely separately. So your orders loop, your first loop, can actually be placed in the header of the email, maybe even at the top if you don't have to actually output code from that loop. And then you can place a lot less code in the place where you actually need to output the HTML, where you actually want to output your product image URLs. So I've had this actually as well, where it's a lot more scalable, this solution, because I've actually had recently, we've built a campaign whereby I had to do a first loop kind of in the orders loop, but I actually had a second table that I had to do a lookup on. So I had to do, let's just say, total value. And by doing it this way, I could only loop through, I could do it so that I only had to loop through the orders row, the orders data extension one time, and then I could build my strings of the tables that I wanted to do lookups to. And otherwise, if you don't do it like this, what you've got to do is in every, let's just jump back, in every place that you want to, on every module, you'd have to repeat code and have this outer order loop wrapped around it. So this, I hope I've explained this, and I'm really happy to go over it in a bit more detail if people are still a bit stumped and a bit confused over this, because I think this is a really good hack, and I've used it quite a lot just to streamline and not have to repeat code and just have the flexibility to put loops in the places without them being overly complex. Another just point on loops that I'd like to just shout about is a way to avoid unnecessary processing on your loop iterations with conditional statements. So I have prayed to the AMPScript gods, I assure you, but unfortunately, while loops don't exist in AMPScript. So a while loop in other programming languages is where you can set a condition to sort of break out of a loop once that condition is met. But unfortunately, that doesn't exist in AMPScript. We only have for loops, which means there's no way to actually break out of a loop. So it will always just loop through the entire data set. So what you can do is use conditional statements inside of your loop to control the processing of scripts and rendering of content based on specific conditions, which allows you to prevent unnecessary code executions. So you can see here, I put this conditional statement. If you remember in the scenario, we only wanted to show 3 product images. So once we've shown 3, we don't really need to show any more. So we don't want to do all this processing. So what this actually does is once we've got 3 products shown, we can ignore all of this in the middle, which is lovely, less processing. So place this conditional code as the first thing inside your for loop to essentially skip all the processing if it's not needed. You can, I just want to mention as well, you can also use server-side JavaScript alongside AMPScript to do this. It's a little bit more technical, but if you need greater flexibility, it is an option. So if anyone wants me to talk them through how to do that, just give me a shout. I'd be very happy to take you through that. And finally, let's talk about variables. So this is my next scenario. So let's just say your clients now come back to you. I know we mentioned we wanted to output 3 product images into our email, but now your clients come back to you and said, we actually want to change it to 4 product images. So if you were eagle-eyed, you'll notice that in my previous slide, where I'd put number of products shown, I'd actually hard coded 3 as a number 3. What I try and do when I'm building emails in Salesforce Marketing Cloud is try and preempt any components that could potentially change in future, and then use variables to future-proof it. So a variable is essentially a box. Think of a variable like a box that you can just store information in, and storing information in a variable allows you to reference it at various points in your code. So if you set variables at the top of your email code, then you or your team can find and change this very easily in just one place, instead of finding it everywhere that it's referenced in the code. This is a really great approach for any elements in your email that could potentially need to be altered in future. So the number of product images that you want to show in your email. So I just implore you guys to just have a think about, when you're building an email, what potentially could change, even if the client hasn't said it might change. I like to try and preempt, because it really helps to future-proof. And it means that then if you've got a team, if you're working with a team and some people aren't as technical, they can just go in the header. It's a safe space where they can just change what they need to change without delving into all of the nitty-gritty code further along in the email. So thanks for sticking with me. I'm just going to share a few best practices to finish off. So my first one is to implement error handling and logging. So this is quite important when you're dealing with large data sets. You want to be able to find and identify any problematic records quite quickly and easily. So my first piece of advice is to create a data extension that you can use as a log, and then you can use the insert DE function, which I've shown here, to log information about the error into the log. So it's really helpful for being able to quickly identify problematic records and debug issues, because chances are, if you've got a huge data set, I would love if it all just worked, but it's never the case, is it? So this is a really great way to find and fix those records quickly. So what you can also do is use the raise error function for error handling. So just a few things to mention about this function. A value of true will skip the send for the current subscriber and just move on to the next subscriber. And a value of 1 in the 5th parameter here, that's quite important, because it will preserve data operations to data extensions before the error is raised, even if the subscriber is skipped. So we want to preserve it because we want to try and log all the information about the error into our data log. It's worth noting that this function does still count as an email send, even if the email wasn't sent to a subscriber. And usually in Marketing Cloud, you will have, depending on your contract, you'll have a set number of sends that you're allowed to execute within your contract. So only use this function for exception handling. Don't rely on it for segmenting or excluding a large number of subscribers, because it's still going to count towards your allocation. Final tip, we're nearly there, so thanks for bearing with me, guys. Final tip is to reuse your AMPScript functions. So developing a library of reusable AMPScript functions using code snippets can allow you to utilize the same code across multiple email projects. And reusing AMPScript code with a content block function, such as content block by ID, which I've screenshotted here from one of my emails, means you don't have to actually write the same code multiple times. This not only helps you to speed up development, as time is precious, regardless, but especially when you've got lots and lots of data, but also reduces the likelihood of introducing errors when you're duplicating your code. And storing your AMPScript code in a central code snippet reduces the need for redundant code and improves code maintainability. So it's much easier to make a change or do some maintenance in one place than about 60 different emails. So I would always employ you, create a library if you've got functions that you or things that you're going to use quite a lot. Create a library of code snippets and you utilize that library. It can really, really help speed up your time. So I want to just say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to do a very cheeky plug to my YouTube channel. I've got a QR code here which you can scan. It will take you there. As you can see from the screenshot, you can come and watch me dress in silly costumes using the power of green screen to share what I know about email with the world. I don't just talk about Marketing Cloud. I've got loads of subjects coming up, loads of fun content, and I'm so close to my first 100 subscribers. So if you'd like to come and support me, I would really, really appreciate it and love to have you. And I can promise you some really fun, funny content coming up for this year. Thank you so much. And any questions?
It actually looks like there are no questions from the audience, which I think means you've left no stone unturned. Is that the saying? You've hit every single point. Paul, just 1 second. I'm going to leave you in the wing for now, and I'll invite you to the stage just in a couple minutes. But thank you so much, Jen, for walking us through AMPScript. That was fantastic. And I hope everyone does scan this QR code. Because I've seen your YouTube videos and you are such a fantastic presenter and you're so clear when you deliver this information. So thank you so much once again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Naomi, and thank you very much to everyone who's spoken so far, and good luck to all the next speakers. I'm looking forward to hearing your talks. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.